Right now, we are undergoing two extraordinary revolutions, rewiring how our world works. The first is Bitcoin, the biggest leap in the story of money since humans figured out trade itself. Bitcoin is the birth of an entirely new kind of financial operating system. It rewrites the rules of value, trust, and cooperation on a planetary scale. Alongside the Bitcoin revolution runs another profound transformation, the psychedelic renaissance. These ancient compounds, after being pushed underground for decades, are now re-emerging into mainstream research, medicine, and culture. And they are sparking a revolution in how we understand the mind, consciousness, and healing. And when I say renaissance, I mean that quite literally. This is a fundamental shift, touching everything from neuroscience to mental health, from philosophy to art, changing how we think about what it means to be human. And here's where it gets fascinating. These two revolutions, Bitcoin and psychedelics, share some striking parallels that nobody's talking about. And that's what I intend to do with this video series. In our last video, we explored the 4 classic psychedelics. And today we're diving into the extraordinary science of how psychedelics affect the brain and what they teach us about consciousness. And this will set the stage for our next video, where we will discuss how Bitcoin acts as a kind of digital psychedelic for the economy, rewiring our collective consciousness, mirroring what these compounds do to the individual mind. So buckle up, we're about to embark on a journey that will forever change how you think about money, consciousness, and human civilization. Let's begin. Stanislav Grof, one of the pioneers of psychedelic research, made a beautiful observation. He said that psychedelics are to the study of consciousness what the microscope is to biology, and the telescope is to astronomy. Just as these instruments revealed previously invisible realms of physical reality, psychedelics unveil hidden dimensions of the world and the mind, layers of existence that lie just beyond our everyday awareness. The science starts simply enough. These compounds activate specific receptors in our brains, called 5-HT2A receptors, which normally respond to serotonin. Psychedelics compete with our natural serotonin and activate these receptors far more powerfully than our natural neurotransmitters ever could. But here's where the mystery deepens. When these receptors activate, something extraordinary happens. The barriers that usually keep different brain regions separate begin to dissolve. New connections form, and consciousness expands in ways that seem to defy the very architecture of the brain. And we access realms of experience that were previously invisible to us. We have no idea how this happens. And this raises one of the most provocative questions in all of neuroscience. Why do our brains have receptors capable of generating these expansive states of consciousness? How come these receptors can be activated far beyond what our natural brain chemistry ever reaches? It's not just that these compounds fit our receptors. They unlock states of consciousness so extraordinary that their very existence challenges our understanding of human evolution and the nature of mind itself. Think about it. Why are our brains even capable of having these experiences? Imagine discovering that humans had the latent ability to navigate by echolocation like bats or sense magnetic fields like birds. Abilities that lay dormant until awakened by some external trigger. But what psychedelics reveal is even more remarkable. They don't just open a new sense. They open a new dimension of consciousness that lets us perceive another side of reality. So a question that's on my mind is if this is mere accident. But just as we wouldn't randomly evolve the ability to sense magnetic fields without a purpose, it seems unlikely that we would possess this extraordinary capacity for expanded consciousness by chance. This forgotten ability, rediscovered in the modern world, stands as one of the greatest mysteries of the human mind. This is a map of a normal brain. Each bubble represents a different brain region, and the colors show which regions work together in functional networks, like the visual system, the auditory system, the motor system, the language centers, or the default mode network, which creates our sense of self. The lines between these regions are neural highways showing which regions communicate with each other, and the thickness of these lines show how much traffic flows between them. Now watch what happens when psilocybin enters the system. The neat organizational chart explodes into a dazzling symphony of neural communication. This is the hyperconnected brain. And what's happening here is remarkable. The usual boundaries between brain regions have completely dissolved. You can think of your normal brain like a well-organized office building. Each department has its own floor, its own job, its own rules. But when psilocybin arrives, all the walls come down and the rule book is thrown out. Accounting starts jamming with the creative team, and HR brainstorms with engineering. As this happens in your brain, there's one thing that will stand out to you. Synesthesia, the blending and mixing of senses. This is where you might hear the sound of the color red, or see a piece of music unfold like a beautiful painting in the space before you. But this isn't just your brain running wild. It's more like installing a new operating system in your mind. And while hearing colors and seeing sounds might sound pretty wild, this is just scratching the surface of what's really going on. For example, Francis Crick saw the double helix of DNA while on LSD and won the Nobel Prize for it. Kary Mullis credits psychedelics for insights that led to the development of PCR technology, a cornerstone of modern medicine and forensics, which earned him the Nobel Prize as well. And Steve Jobs called LSD one of the most important experiences of his life. Even Carl Sagan wrote about psychedelics and how they transformed his understanding of the cosmos. And in the arts, it was like someone switched on the lights. The Beatles went from "I Want to Hold Your Hand" to "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds," and music was never the same. Jimi Hendrix picked up a guitar and made it speak a new language. Alex Gray began painting what he saw in these states, and suddenly we had an entirely new visual language for inner experience. Psychedelics have transformed philosophy so completely that after the 1950s, it's essentially impossible to be a philosopher without them. And they have radically changed how we think about consciousness, reality, and what it means to be human. Psychedelics didn't just give new answers to old questions. They showed us which questions we should be asking in the first place. And here's something even more intriguing. This is an important question for you to ponder. What if our normal consciousness is actually a reduced state of reality? What if this hyperconnected state reveals something more fundamental about the nature of existence? Here's something that blew my mind. After a century of research, scientists still have no clue how consciousness works. Zero progress in 100 years. We know little more about consciousness today than we did in the beginning of the 20th century. We've assumed that consciousness emerges from the brain, but we still can't explain how a bunch of neurons create the taste of coffee, the color blue, or the feeling of being you. So maybe we've been asking the wrong question all along. There's a wild theory that's taking consciousness research by storm. panpsychism, and some of the world's leading philosophers and physicists are starting to think that this might be the answer we're looking for. Let me explain what panpsychism is, using vision as an example. Right now, you think you're seeing reality with your eyes, but you're not. What you're actually experiencing is your brain's translation of electromagnetic radiation, light, a fundamental force of the universe. The colors you see when you look out into the world, they don't exist in base reality. Electromagnetic radiation has no color. The colors you see are made by your brain. In fact, everything you see is made by your brain. Your brain creates a visual simulation of base reality to help you navigate existence. But everything you see is a simulation made by your brain. Your brain is a reality-generating machine. It takes in raw data from base reality and creates the conscious experience you're having right now. And here's the kicker. We can never experience base reality directly. Whatever base reality is, whatever exists outside of our senses and brains, we will never know. We only ever experience a tiny slice of reality through our biological aperture, our eyes, ears, and skin. Our senses work as the interface to base reality, and our brains use that information that is relayed by our senses, but it actually has little to do with what's actually out there. We exist within reality, but are forever separated from knowing it directly. Now here's where it gets fascinating. What if consciousness works the same way as vision? What if, instead of being created by our brains, consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, as fundamental as space, time, gravity, or light? Just as particles arise from the quantum field and get their mass from the Higgs field, maybe matter gets its awareness from a cosmic consciousness field. In this view, consciousness doesn't arise from complex matter. Instead, complex matter arises from consciousness. Consciousness, in this view, is the fundamental substrate, not matter. So maybe consciousness doesn't emerge from the brain. Maybe the brain simply receives consciousness, much like the eyes and the brains receive light or electromagnetic radiation to produce vision. To perceive electromagnetic radiation, a sufficiently complex structure like eyes and the brain is necessary. And perhaps a sufficiently complex structure like the brain can also tap into the consciousness field, from which it generates not vision, but awareness of experience. This would mean that we all share the same consciousness and that we're all one. Like waves in an ocean are all made of the same water. The consciousness field is what mystics have called source or God. It's where we come from and where we return to. Just like the wave comes from the ocean and returns to the ocean. Our normal consciousness, the one we take for granted every day, might just be one narrow channel on a much larger spectrum of possible experiences. At least that's what psychedelics seem to tell us. So, what have we learned? Psychedelics create a hyperconnected state in our brains, dissolving boundaries and enabling new ways of thinking and seeing the world. A high entropy state where boundaries are dissolved and we gain new ways of seeing and thinking. Psychedelics suggest that consciousness may be the fundamental substrate of reality, not matter, and that our normal state of awareness might just be a very tiny slice of what's possible. In the next video, we'll explore how Bitcoin creates a similar kind of hyperconnectivity in society, and how this digital psychedelic might expand our collective consciousness in ways we're only beginning to understand. Until then, stay safe, stack sats, and remember, reality might be far stranger and more wonderful than we imagine. Peace out.
Get your copy of Yoni's book, Abundance Through Scarcity, in the description below.